So now we're going to play a game called Don't You Just Hate When It Happens? You can chime in if you'd like. It's really a fun game. So years and years ago, on my very first date with my first and second husband, he asked me if I had ever gone horseback riding before. And I was trying to be real cool. And even though the only time I had ever gone was at Holiday Hill for 25 cents, where a guy with only one tooth kind of like leads you around. But I'm like, yeah, I ride. And he said, great. So here I am, and I wear these really tight jeans where I had to lay on the bed to zip them up because I couldn't get them on. And I was wearing these 4.5-inch stiletto heel cowboy boots because I was, riding. And as God is my witness, I was riding for 2.5 hours with guys by the name of Suck 'em Up Steve and Buffalo Phil and Roundabout Randy and Psycho Dick. And here I am. And I'm pretending that I am not, my life is not flashing before my eyes, and I am just dying. And so finally we stopped. It was like, thank God. And I really had to pee, but there was no toilet paper. And I knew that if I had to lay on the ground to get my pants unzipped, that I'd get all those cacti prickly things on my back. So I was like, okay, fine. So I took off my boots, and my feet were so swollen, just so swollen. And in the corner of my eye, I saw this beautiful lake, gorgeous, with these beautiful lily pads. So I was kind of like hopping, and I thought, aha, they're up there spitting tobacco and, chewing and drinking and, in the middle of South Bumbleclook. And I'm like, aha, they can go drink their beer. And I was squishing my toes in the lily pads, and I was just in heaven. And all of a sudden, I saw this one guy, and he started pointing at me, and he said, "What the hell are you doing?" And I just said, "Oh, I'm just squishing my toes in the lily pads." And I don't know, they were spitting up, more tobacco and more beer, and they said, "You dipshit, those aren't lily pads, those are cow pies." Don't you just hate when that happens? So then, after I divorced him for the second time, I had to get back on the dating scene, and I was fixed up on this blind date. The guy's name was George, and he seemed kind of nice, and of course you have to do the obligatory, why did you get divorced? Well, why did you get divorced? It is so much fun. But anyway, it was his turn, and he said, well, Laura, I almost died. And I looked at him and I said, George, you look wonderful. What happened? I mean, you look fine. And he said, I had kidney failure. And miraculously, my ex-wife was a perfect donor for me. And I said, oh my God, what a wonderful woman. I can't wait to meet her. What a sweet, wonderful, selfless thing to do. And you divorced her? What happened? And he said, Laura, an unbelievable thing happens when you're about to die. You realize what is really, truly important in your life. And I realized I never really loved my wife. So I stopped and I said, so your wife and you were married for 23 years, and you had 4 kids, and she gave you an organ, and you realized you never really loved her. Don't you hate when that happens? Okay. So last month was a pretty big birthday of mine, and I was pretty traumatized, and my sweet husband was feeding my ego, and he said, oh, honey, you're cute, you're sweet, you still turn heads, you're yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, thank you, dear. Well, our air conditioner had broken, and our house was a hot, sticky mess. So he decided he might as well be hot and sticky too, so he decided to cut the lawn. And he said, will you do me a big favor and fill up the gas tank? So I was like, sure. So I ran upstairs, and I got dressed, and I drove up the street, and I saw these 5 construction workers who were fixing the potholes in our subdivision. And all 5 of them stopped, and they looked at me. So I drove a little bit farther, and I thought, my husband's right again. I'm still turning heads. And then I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, and I had this big aluminum foil, Werther's Original, sugar-free, stuck to my sweaty face. So I realized they weren't like looking at me like, they were looking at me like, don't you just hate when that happens? And finally, we had a parent-teacher conference a couple months ago. I hadn't eaten. I was tired. I was kind of in for the home stretch. And I think I had only like 1 or 2 teachers left. So I was standing in line for about 10 minutes, and I finally got to the teacher, and he said, "Oh, Mrs. Ray, I just want you to know Madison is doing fabulous. She's got an 89.3769, and all she has to do is do a little bit of extra credit, and she'll get an A-." And I said, "Oh, Mr. Corwin, I am thrilled. Thank you so much." And he said, "Well, does she have any problems at all with her homework recently?" And I thought about it, and I said, "As a matter of fact, she does. That's funny that you asked." I said, "Just last night, she didn't know where to put the hymen on the anatomically correct diagram." His bald head started sweating. He turned beet red, and he said, "You mean hyphen, right? Where to put the hyphen?" And I said, "No, I said hymen." I said, "You are the anatomy teacher, aren't you?" And he said, "No, lady, I'm your kid's English teacher." Don't you just hate when that happens?